slides. One thing I think I ought to do before I forget about it is to look at, because we were talking about diphthong shift, we'll look at diphthong shift, and I'll just go through this slide. Do you remember we've sort of forgotten the first estuary English thing that we did, but we'll be looking at that again. Diphthong shift, which occurred in estuary English, has to say all wise and so on instead of all ways, pint instead of paint and so on. This very, very common thing which you're going to be having to look at in most South England accents and in the Australian and New Zealand accents. Let me just go through it since we mentioned it, and you should recognize it better when we come to it then in London. And this was the question I asked you: what's the difference between a bison and a, what was it? I can't remember. Buffalo. You can't wash your hands in a buffalo. And this reason here being then that you've got bison, you've got basin, sometimes pronounced basin, but it's not very often, it's usually basin. I think we can take that out. Basin being pronounced bison by people who have diphthong shift, and so they mishear the word bison as, okay, you get it, okay, that's all right. Let's get past that thing, because it's an old joke. And what I wanted to point out that you sometimes see this diphthong shift shown in literature when Cockneys or Southern English people are talking. This is perhaps a famous little verse from the old ballads. Oh, I am the cook and the captain bold and the mate of the Nancy brig. He's making fun of Coleridge's Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner here. And a man comes across this old man sitting on the beach, and he says, I am the cook and the captain bold and the mate of the Nancy brig and the boatswain tight. What tight means? It means that he drinks a lot. It's an old slang phrase for somebody who's under the influence of alcohol. And the boatswain tight and the midship mite and the crew of the captain's gig. It's an old thing. The point is that he got shipwrecked and everybody had to eat everybody else, and he ended up being the last person who'd ate everybody else on the ship. So he was everybody on the ship, that's all. A lovely gruesome story. But do you notice that he says the word here should be midship mate? Okay. But he wanted to rhyme with tight, so he changed it to midship mite, because he's giving this guy diphthong shift, midship mite. But of course, if the guy was really talking, he would also have had diphthong shift on tight, and we would have said toit, so it wouldn't work. And you'll notice very, very often, for instance, in the novels of John Cowper Poyse, you'll notice very often that he uses some spelling way of showing diphthong shift, but it's not consequent. He doesn't use it on all the words. And people think perhaps that people who don't have diphthong shift think that Londoners are mixing up the I vowel and the A vowel, but they're not, because they move everything all the way through. Okay? So if we look at it, let's look at the initial simplification to help us to understand what's going on. You get the RP words, paint, pint, and point. And you look at the London way of doing it, which would be pint, point, and point. Okay? Something like that anyway. This is perhaps more... This is not quite London that I'm giving you here. Ooh, it's more. It sounds to me a little bit more like East Anglian places in East Anglia, but still, I don't know. And you'll see that what seems to be happening initially is that I is moving up to where A should be, and Oi is moving up to where I should be. And that's the way that people who don't have this shift will hear it. It's the way we hear the pronunciation. And you'll notice actually that the RP pronunciation, A, I, and Oi, is of course a shifted pronunciation from the way it looks in the spelling, because the spelling shows the pronunciation, 400 years ago, 600 years ago. The spelling shows pint, and pint, and puint, which is rather different from the way we pronounce it today. That's diphthong shift, okay? But we're used to RP, and we can see that diphthong. Sorry, this is not diphthong shift. This is the great vowel shift, which we were talking about last lesson, and we'll go on talking about today. But this is the diphthong shift. Basically, let me give you some more. Better examples of what actually is happening in the diphthong shift. If we take the A vowel diphthong, the I diphthong, and the Oi diphthong, you remember they start from these three different places and they move up towards E. They don't get very far. They don't actually get right up towards E, but they do this. A, I, and Oi. Okay? And what seems to be happening, we'll take Oi first. What seems to be happening is that's moving in this direction and becoming Ui. You see that movement there? Take it again. Oi is becoming Ui. I, on the other hand, is moving backwards and becoming not I, but I. And then it's moving up to Oi. So these movements are in the same direction, aren't they? They're movements anti-clockwise. I, Oi. And if we take the A vowel, then the last one here, that seems to be moving down to I. A is moving down to I. Okay? And then we might look at the fleece vowel, which used to be here just E, but I think I have a beginning of a diphthong shift there, and I say E, something like that. Begin with I and E. That would be a typical London pronunciation. E, fleece, fleece, fleece. And then the I, the beginning, moves down towards that, so that you get flace, flace. So the whole thing is moving around all the time. And we can show it a little bit better. This is from my web page. We can show it a little bit better by it seems to be this sort of movement of the place of the beginning. Okay? So E is moving down like this. The first, do you know this word? The first mora of the diphthong. Diphthongs have two. What's the plural of mora? Morai? I have to look that up, probably. Or moras. And this is the first mora, and the second mora is the second one. That's what's happening in the fleece shift. This is the face shift, the same movement. So A is coming down to I, and it may be moving to I, something like that. All right? The price shift is doing the same thing. I is moving to I, is moving to Oi, is moving to Oi. But all going in the same direction in the end. The choice shift, Oi, is moving up to Ui. But the goat shift seems to be going, now we're looking at the other shifts, the goat shift seems to be going in the other direction. So that the original vowel would have been goat. Then we get goat diphthongalization to goat, goat. And then what I have is goat, but here you've got, come in. What I have is goat, but here you've got goat and gout. So these shifts seem to be moving in that direction. This seems to be the general movement over the past 200 or 300 years of the goat. Well, the last 100 years of the goat vowel. Here is the goose shift. Again, it seems to be moving in this direction against the others. So it used to be oo, then it's changing into oo, oo, oo. Okay, goose, goose. This is sort of Sussex pronunciation. Goose is my pronunciation. It's almost like a diphthong. Oo. Very old English RP speakers will say goose, goose with an oo like that, like Icelanders do. It's the same thing as the fleece. Do you remember fleece becomes fleece and so on? But what's happening also in the goose shift, which is rather strange, is that the oo itself. No, we'll go back to the goose shift. There's the mouth shift. Okay, the mouth shift. That's also going in this direction. Mouth here, mouth, 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 mouse. Okay, and in London, the oo is moving down to schwa, so you've got not here mouth, but you've got mass, mass. Can down to my ass, which we heard in the yeah.
So all the foot diphthongs are moving clockwise.
It seems to be, doesn't it? The diphthongs that are on that side are all moving clockwise, and the diphthongs that are that end on the rising to the front are moving anti-clockwise, and what is rising to the back is moving clockwise. Roughly, that's what's happening. Roughly. But look, you'll see something else is happening here also, which is rather annoying. That is, the ending is moving forward. This is another thing which is happening in English. So that instead of, you listen to Australians, they may have not mouth, but mice. May, it's coming up here. It's turning into a rounded front vowel. And oo is doing this widely throughout. Yes, come in. Thank you. Yes. Just like to sit there. This is. This is happening with all the oo vowel, the oo and the foot vowel. It seems to be moving this way, and I think this is a movement which we will hear very clearly over the next 100 years. That oo will change to e in English. That does seem to be a movement which occurs in other languages, like Welsh, for instance. Yeah.
And what will change to oo?
Exactly.
The a, or
what will move up to oo? If oo moves away, you've got a hold there, and then things start to move. Probably the closest vowels will move into it. Or might move. Yeah. Or is moving up in London. Thought is going up to thought. That could easily then go up to thoot. We'll have to come back in 200 years and see what it's all like. But that's all speculation. He deals briefly with diphthong shift in volume 1, and that is in one of the readings which I gave you. Okay, that's diphthong shift. So you can see you've got this various movement, and in fact you've got at one point a bit of a crossover here. The lower vowels here are the lower vowels. What was it? It was the mouth vowel always moving here. So you've got mouth and perhaps mouth here, whereas the I vowel is moving here. So you've got moist. So they're sort of crossing over, the typical way of thinking of for instance, the way we speak of an Australian pronunciation is that we say they don't say mouth anymore, they say mice, with an I vowel, but they're not doing that, they're saying may, something a bit different. It's more rounded at the end. It's the way we hear it. Okay, let's get rid of that then. And I'm wondering, I think we should, before I go into... I think what I should do now is to continue with the processes that we started with last week. Since I'm talking about this, and in the second lesson we'll start listening to the texts. We did how far did we get last week? We were talking about complete and incomplete processes last Monday. Incomplete processes, residualisms, and we went down. We were looking at the great vowel shift, and I don't think we went further than the great vowel shift. Let me just remind you, you've got to have the great vowel shift clear in your minds. You've got to have the fact that the spelling shows the original pronunciation, and you can see nama with an a here is now went up to nem. But what happened later? Clean went up to clean, sweet went up to sweet, and the two top ones dropped over, flipped over, and became diphthongs. Okay, and it looks then a little bit as if this movement is repeating itself today, so that sweet today, the e vowel, and you'll see clean has moved up and joined the sweet vowel. Sweet is also doing the same thing and going the same way that tide went in its time. We know Chaucer had tide and not tide. Shakespeare had tide. Now we've got tide, and it looks like sweet is turning into sweet. Exactly the same way. The same movement is happening. That's as far as we've got. Now, this is why we mentioned the great vowel shift. It's the effects on it in modern English which interest us. Notice, while I'm there, that we are only talking about the long vowels. It only happened to the long vowels. Didn't happen to the short vowels. This is the important point. So the effects of the great vowel shift is that this spelling, we have this spelling relation of long, so-called long and short vowels in spelling today. Okay, which is a little bit complicated for people who begin to learn English. So you've got the distinction between words like bit and bite. That's difficult for people who are beginning to learn to write English, all English children, for instance. And when you began to learn, but we very soon forget that initial difficulty, very soon forget it, and we think of this letter as being, we call it I, we think of it as being I. We think of the letters O in moon as being oo, but we've got to try and remember, think through the pronunciation, go back to spelling, it is oo, it is an O sound, O. That's the original pronunciation. So you've got this strange spelling relation, and sometimes this comes out in certain words. They waver. Some people say privacy and some people say privacy. Some people say patriot and some people say patriot. Some people say lever and some people say lever. So there's some words have sort of gone both ways there. And that's the reason for this change. Sometimes lever, for instance, is an American pronunciation. Lever is an English pronunciation. But patriot and privacy and privacy are, I don't know which ones I say myself. So I probably change around quite a bit. And then you've got this change in morphology. You've got the fact that words like divine and serene and profane use the short form of the I in divinity, serenity, profanity, nation and national, which is one of the reasons why people who want to change the old, why people who like the old spelling want to keep it, because it shows that these two words are the same, national and national. If we were to write them a and a, then this correspondence would disappear. And this is because what happens here is before the great vowel change occurs, you've got divine. You have a rule in trisyllabic words with 3 syllables, that the long E becomes a short E. So divine, but divinity. And it's only the long vowel which changes to I, not the short vowel. Same here. Profane and profanity. profane and profanity. It would have been changes to I, profane, but profanity doesn't change. So that's this morphological thing, which this change of the shape of the word, which the great vowel shift shows. Yeah, I've got it here. Trisyllabic shortening. What happened was a stressed long vowel became short if it occurred before a consonant and then a vowel and a consonant and a vowel. Stressed long vowel became short in that position. You can see, so became short in front of a consonant, a vowel, consonant and a vowel, which stopped the great long shift. And there are various other relationships, such as bite, bitten, divide, division, keep, kept, and so on, which these are all spelling relationships, and all these, up to number 4, are in they're in English, the Southern English dialects, and most dialects of English. But dialectally, there is a difference in the great vowel shift between the north and the south of England and between Scotland and England. This is the big thing that reminds us of dialects here, because here is, let's again look at the great vowel shift as it occurred in the south of England. Long vowels then moved up one, this one moved down. Okay, that's roughly what happened. But in the north of England and in Scotland, something rather strange happens. Before the great vowel shift starts working, this long vowel, or in Storn, had moved forward and centralized to stern. And from there on, the great vowel shift changed it up to steen. These sounds don't exist anymore in Scottish. Okay, they've gone out and that's regressed. But what happens is that there is no movement up to throw oo out. So oo remains in Scottish. So you get the mouth vowel in Scottish, which used to be, if you think of the old form, it used to be mooth, and it moved over in the south to mouth and mouth. Okay, mouth and mouth, it kept on moving down. This is the first change. The oo vowel, another word, an easier word to see would be house, because you can see the Icelandic form, which is also the Old English form. Hús, okay. Whereas that's changed to house in the south, it didn't change in many Scottish dialects, and you still have hús in the Scottish dialect. Now, hús, mooth, let's go out of the house. Okay.
And
Yeah.
the reason for this is because what took another path?
Because the reason we think is that you see, what seems to have been, this seems to point to the fact that everything is pushing each other out of the way. Do you remember we talked about push and pull chains last Monday? Okay. So that R would be moving up and that these things would be pushing this out of the way. And that corresponds with the idea I was talking about, that Londoners were raising their vowels to make a distinction between themselves and East Anglians coming in, and Midlanders coming in. So if that was happening, if it's a push chain, they're pushing things up, then there would be no pressure on oo to change. That's what's happening. And that's one of the indications that it's a push chain rather than a pull chain. But as I say, there are other indications which tend to show us that it's a pull chain rather than a push chain. But I think I should point out here one new concept that we have to get into our minds. And this is the distinction between, I still haven't got a screen to write on, unfortunately, so we have to do it like this. This is the distinction between traditional dialect and what we might call modern dialects. And traditional dialect, we can say these are the really old dialects which have mostly disappeared from English today, but we can still use them to some extent because, for instance, in Scottish, traditional Scottish dialect has got a lot of stuff written in that dialect. For instance, Burns. It was Burns Day a week ago, wasn't it? Did we remember that? Burns, the great Scottish poet. He wrote a lot of stuff in traditional dialect, and that is pronounced, that is recited, and everybody knows about it. And so we keep alive the idea that hus is pronounced hus and night is pronounced nicht, although you probably won't find any real speakers who do it normally, but they can get into the traditional dialect. I've got one or two traditional dialect Yorkshire things for you to show you, and it's very difficult to understand a word they're saying. They really are difficult. And the whole grammatical and phonological setup is different. Traditional, yeah. Traditional, thank you. Okay. Not traditional dialect, but traditional dialect. Okay, so that is something you've got to bear in mind. Some of the things we're talking about here are, can we say they're fossils, fossilized dialects? You won't actually hear them in England today, but we all know about them. But most of the dialects I'm talking about will be modern dialects and not the traditional ones. The other residue which we mentioned is NG coalescence, which I'd like you to, I just mentioned it briefly last week. You remember that G becomes 0, G becomes 0. When it occurs after a nasal, at the end of a morpheme or the end of a word. And we talked about that in phonetics a little bit in the first year. So that what that means is that, first of all, it's not in Birmingham, not in Manchester, and not in Liverpool. That's the only reason we learn it. Okay, so what it means, as I began to talk about last week, is that sing drops the g. Okay? But finger doesn't drop the g. Why? Because it doesn't occur at the end of a morpheme or a word here. This is one morpheme, isn't it? This is not an ending. It's part of the word. Finger. But singer would be at the end of a morpheme, because this ER is an ending. It's somebody who sings. So singer, but finger. That's first year stuff. If you're not clear about that, then go back and look at the videos for the first year. So this is what shows the distinction between Birmingham, Manchester, the West Midlands, and Liverpool, the West Midlands. Jay's accent, as I said last week, although he doesn't use it very much. And listen to that when it comes when people are saying sing and singer and singing, then they will come from that area, nowhere else in the world. Now, and Iceland, they'll come from Iceland as well, because that's what the Icelanders do. Okay, and I think a lot of Scandinavians do. But notice you get a lot of, now this is a new phrase for us, hypercorrection. Can you remember that word? Perhaps a better word would be hyper-adaption. Because correction, what I'm trying to say here is that when people try to raise their dialect from their geographical dialect, speak more like an RP speaker, they may make mistakes. And for instance, if people start thinking, I mustn't say singer, I must say singer because it sounds better, Then they like you to do the same with finger and say finger, because it sounds better. And that would be an overcorrection, a hypercorrection. We must listen to that. You'll hear it. You'll hear a hypercorrections happening in the Andover, text that I gave you last week. And I'll point it out when it comes to it. You get a lot of hypercorrections with H dropping. People who drop off H's at the beginning of a word, they say Harry and not Harry. And they hypercorrect, put it back in words like Arthur, which doesn't have an H, and they will say Harther. Okay, so hypercorrection is a very common thing to listen to, but I don't think we should call it correction, because that is prescriptive, that's saying what's right and wrong. Usually we call it hyperadaption. It means an adaptation which goes too far. Okay, it's better to call it a hyperadaptation, then we're not being prescriptive. But I should just also point out, if I'm saying that some people say finger, that means that they're making the mistake and they come from Birmingham, Manchester or Liverpool and they're trying to make their language better. There are areas where there is generalized NG coalescence. Parts of Scotland and Ulster. I'm not sure, there may be in Wales as well, where this is the correct pronunciation, where NG in words like anger, finger, England will be pronounced anger, and England and finger. That does occur generally. So what that means is that what's happened there is that this has gone even further. This rule has gone even further. G becomes 0 after any nasal, and that drops out. It always becomes. That happens in some dialects. Some British dialects, not abroad at all. I don't understand this last sentence at all. Variably generalized in certain words elsewhere. English, language. Oh, that's right. You may hear people saying English and language. Says Wells. English and language. That's what Wells says. But I've never heard it. So Wells knows what he's talking about. So here's NG coalescence. Then if you go onto the variable sheet and click that, you can hear me saying long singing, where it hasn't happened, where it's minus, and long and singing, where it has happened. And it's only then in the West Midlands where it hasn't happened.
Doesn't the G drop out in England?
No.
In general American?
England. Yeah, well, you could be right there. Yeah, you could be right there. Because the Americans drop everything out that they possibly can.
Exactly.
Like, for instance, international. They never say international now. That's T dropping out, which Wells never mentions. International. The internet. They can't make a distinction between internet and the inner net. That's quite amazing. So you may be right there, but I think Americans would not be aware of it, and if you ask them, how do you say England, then they would put the G back, because they would be thinking about how it should be. But you may very well be right. Let's listen to that.
I don't want to see. That's what I'm saying.
You don't want to say. You don't want to say England.
No.
But it could be because you're not a native American speaker.
I did live in the States.
Yeah. But you've got this Icelandic blood in you.
Yeah.
And that's what makes people say. I mean, Icelanders always say I think.
Case of hyperadaptation?
I don't think so. No, it's sort of underadaptation or something. No, I think it's difficult to say. Very difficult to say. It's very difficult to say. And when you said it that Americans do say England, it sounded right to me. So maybe you're right there. But you've got to remember that most Icelanders always say England. Heitir á íslensku. And different rules in Icelandic for when the G has dropped off. Okay. Yeah, it's rather nice. Icelanders will say, for instance, single. It's a single case, but you'll say single.
Single, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Americans don't say single. Maybe just in that word. Oh, that's why. Good. That's why Wells says variably generalized in certain words elsewhere, like English and language. It's variably generalized. In a variable sense, some people have generalized it to
I
that.
want to say language with the G,
Yeah.
but English without the G.
And language sounds much more strange to me than England does. England. Do I say England or do I say England? England. And that's a good point. Never use yourself as an informant. Never say, I say, because you don't know what you say. You can catch yourself just afterwards. I think this is the last of the residuants, the velar fricative, and that has gone everywhere. That's words like right, ate, bought, daughter, through. You could hear old recordings of people pretending to speak in traditional accent who will say recht, echt, brocht, dochter, and terug. But I don't really think that exists anymore in. And remember, the Old English one would have been recht, echt, dach, brocht, dochter, and terug. That's where it comes from. Why am I giving you these words? Edinburgh, borough, Edinburgh, cough, rough, laugh. Oh yeah, okay. This is my pronunciation. Borough, Edinburgh. And this is the Scottish pronunciation as well. Borough, Edinburgh. Borough with schwa, schwa. But Americans will tend to say borough and Edinburgh here. It's the same word, it's just spelt differently to make it look sort of Scottish. Okay. In some words, the h sound is changing to f, cough, rough, and laugh, and that has happened everywhere. But it used to be koch and lach. What is an Icelandic dog say when it barks? What? What does a French dog say when it barks?
Woof.
Again?
Woof.
Woof. Woof. Okay. An English dog says bow wow.
Well, I've actually heard the woof as well.
Woof. But the original one is bow wow, which is ridiculous because dogs don't say bow wow. But if you look at the old spelling, it would have been woof, woof, which sounds much more like a dog, doesn't it? Woof, woof, which is what, and this is changing to, okay. Haven't got any other languages here? What do dogs say? What does dogs say in Japanese? One, one. Not that. One. Okay, that must be a change, mustn't it? It must be a later change because dogs never say that. I'll give you a very good example. What do sheep say in Icelandic? Meh. Okay. In English they say bear.
Actually, I thought it was bar.
Well, it's spelled bar. Bar, black sheep. No, it's pronounced like this, bar. Okay. What do they say in French?
I don't know if it starts with the M or with the V. But
Me.
I think it's the difference between the sheep and the goats. There's one starting with an M
It's a different dialect with the goats, right? But do you know what they say in Greek? Sheep in Greek say VV, which is weird, isn't it? But look how they say this, VV. But look how it's spelt. It's spelt which in Homeric Greek was bear. But the B has changed to V, and the air has changed to E in modern Greek. So all the poor Greek sheep have to go around saying, a bear, bear. It's lovely once the way these things.
In Germany, I think the dogs say bow bow
Bow bow.
with a V.
Yeah. That would have been an original woch, woch, something like that. Woch, woch. You should always ask the dogs, they know what they're doing. Sometimes what's happened is that the dropping off of the ch here has caused lengthening, and you can see this instead of, we don't say richt would have been short, the ch drops off and you get ri, which changes to left. So that's going to be, and there's some retention, it's kept to some extent in traditional dialect, but the local accent with the standard form usually exists. So if you've got a traditional dialect form like richt, then the local accent would be right in Scottish. And for instance, in Scottish, hus is the traditional form, but people usually say house, come back to my house. But when they want to be very, very Scottish, and it's Burns night, they say, come back to my house. And everybody thinks, oh, how Scottish it is to be. And the Scots do this a tremendous amount. My God, I'm treading on the microphone. I wonder if it's still working. Okay. Oh, there's one more, isn't there? Is there one more? Yes, there's one more. There's the long mid mergers. And remember again, just to remind you, we are dealing... Oh, it's past. I think we should have a quick break. Yes, let's have a quick break, and then I'll go on to the long mid mergers. And also check whether my microphone is working. Yes, it's working. How lovely. Good. One day I'm going to put these things together and edit them, so that's necessary to do this, you understand. Let's get rid of this thing here. Get rid of the residualisms so we can start thinking of more interesting things. Briefly, if I can explain, this is the long mid mergers, I can explain the way Wells sets this up and what he means by it. He's showing a time span which goes down from here. He begins with Middle English, then what happens with the Great Vowel Shift, then the long mid mergers, then 18th century raising, and then long mid diphthonging. So these things happen in that order, roughly, okay? And this is what happens. He takes the words here, pain and raise, which in the Middle Age, days, which in the Middle Ages would have been pan, raz, daz. Then pain, raise, and days, which would have been in the Middle Ages pain and raise and days. Okay, as we can see, it would have been originally pine, but it's changed to pain. Toe, soul, toe. Now, I'll use my mother's pronunciation to make it easier. Toe, soul, and nose. I say soul now, but toe, soul, and nose, which would have been a long O sound, toe, soul, and nose. And if you think of the Icelandic here, tau or saul, then that will help you to understand that the original form would have been ta and sol in Old English, and it's moved up from ah here at the bottom, it's moved up to or, like stone. So we've got into Middle English here. And toe, soul, and no, oh. I'm mixing up this soul with that soul, so that doesn't, what I just said doesn't work.
Solely. Town solely.
Yo. So wind back. I didn't say that last bit there. Okay, forget about it. All right. So that would be nose. Tall, soul, stone, nose, but nose. Okay. Then you get the great vowel shift, and what happens in the great vowel shift is that the long R moves up to A, but A doesn't change. This line here says no change. O moves up to U, but O doesn't change. So after the great vowel shift, you have pain and pain, and you have toe and toe. And then we get what we call the long mid mergers, the long vowels in the middle merge and drop together, so these two words now become the same. Pain and toe. These two types become the same. And this is where the split occurs, because in some languages, some parts of England, they are still distinct. A very few parts of England, they're still distinct. So that's a long mid-merger, and that was probably happening in the 16th or 17th century, I'm guessing. I'm not sure about that. Then you get, further on, you get 18th century raising. Air changes to E. O is already raised, so it doesn't change. And then long mid diphthonging, which is a modern thing. A changes to A, and we get pain and toe instead of toe, okay? And then O goes on to change more to toe and so on, and it's splitting in my dialect to toe and O, soul and toe and so on. So there's further changes that are happening here. So we've got the situation in England whereby long mid-mergers have not occurred everywhere. I'm going to come back to this in a minute. Long mid-mergers have not occurred everywhere. And that is, I showed you this last week, I believe, only in much smaller areas than I've shown here. Wales and in that little area here, and some places still in Newfoundland. We'll talk about the old American dialects later on. And then you get, without the merger in these remaining places, days and days, nose and nose or nose. But everywhere else in the world you get, the merger has gone through days and nose. Okay. But nose has changed to nose, and this is a later change. Then if we go back here, long mid diphthonging, A has changed to A and O has changed to O, and some places that hasn't happened either. So if you could think of long mid diphthonging is face and nose, from face and nose. Many places that hasn't happened, and a few places this hasn't happened. So this is the 17th century, let's say, that still remains in some places, but this long mid diphthonging, which is fairly modern, you'll find this all over the world, in fact. People are not saying nose, they're saying nose, they're not saying pain or pain, they're saying pain or pain. That's quite American as well. Let's look at what happens here if we look at then two places in East Anglia, Ipswich and Colchester, where you get, and we'll look at where they are. Here's East Anglia, here's the south of England, London, Brighton, Dover, Cambridge, Colchester, Ipswich, Lowestoft, and Norwich, Norwich. Okay, and if you look at the distinction, then we're talking between Colchester here and Ipswich here. These two fairly close to each other. Then you get this distinction. You get this distinction, whereas in Ipswich you have, let's read it, road, nose, and road and nose, something like that. And Colchester, just a little bit further north, you get road, nose, road, nose. Okay, road and road, nose and nose. So we would think then that you're drawing a line, a distinct line here, one variable between Colchester and Ipswich. But if we go on to look a bit closer, we'll find we introduce Lowestoft. Here's Lowestoft. Here's the L at the top. If we introduce Lowestoft, we find that Lowestoft does something different again. It says road and nose, but then road and nose. So you see what happens there with Lowestoft is that they have remains of no long mid-mergers. They make a distinction between the spelling here, still comes out. And you can hear that distinction also in Wales. So that really we have to draw the line not there between Colchester and Ipswich, but between Lowestoft, between Norwich, and I don't really know about Lowestoft. I think Lowestoft is the same as Norwich and the south. So you see, it's very complicated what actually is going on and how you're going to draw the lines there.
But if you do this, then how do you show the difference between Ipswich and the other one?
Ipswich and yeah, what you'd have to do here is to have several what are they called? Thank you, isoglosses. Yes, several isoglosses showing different variables. This also you'll hear in England, the fleece merger. If you remember, what happens is that when you go back to the great vowel shift, you get words like meat and peace and meat and peace, and the spelling will tell you that once they had different pronunciations. Middle English in the 14th century was mate, mate and pes, mate and mat. In Old English it would have been mate and mat, or something like that. It's mate and mat. The great vowel shift by about 1600, it would have changed. Both have moved up. A had moved up to E and A have moved up to A. So meat and mate. But the fleece merger by about 1700, they've gone together into meat. Okay, so it's a 1700 thing. The two vowels have joined together. And if we can just go back very roughly to look at that, you can see what's happening here. What happens is that Nam moves up to Nam, Clan moves up to Clean, Sweet moves up to Sweet, but then Clan also moves up to Sweet. So we get Clean. And that's the last, it's a merger there, so that you get there. By about 1700, you've got this thing merging. And what it means is that you do find places still in England where these two groups of words are separated. And you get pronunciations something like meat and meat, see and seer, something like that. And sometimes I think in Ireland, you might even get meat and mate, see and say. Some Irish accents might do that. That would be, there you go, sweet moves up to E, and clan moves up to clan, and they both move up to sweet and clean, while tide has moved out of the way. Okay, those are, I won't go on to the next one, I'll just try to give you a pattern. I'm not going to go through it, but I'm going to give you a pattern. Next week I'll be talking about not the completed processes, we'll be talking about not residualisms, but ones which are more prominent, which much more important next week then. Ones which don't leave just little areas of England, but ones which leave huge areas of England, ones which have happened later, like the footstrap merger, nurse merger, bath trap split, and so on. And we'll be talking about those last week. I shall be going next week. Okay. But what we do now is to try to juggle the text and the sound. Okay. This is the text I asked you to look at for this week, and one of my distance learner students has actually finished it and sent it back to me. I'm not going to take it in from you. We'll go through it in class a bit, and then towards the end I shall be giving you the answers to these things. Okay? Now here we've got several varieties, variables which I haven't really talked about yet. Rhoticity, which is briefly, that's whether you pronounce R or not. Ing variable is whether you say ing or in at the end of a word. And that's a strange variable because it seems to be a social variable which is the same everywhere in the English-speaking world.
So this is the in or in?
Yeah, I'm loving it. Okay, instead of I'm loving it.
Yeah. Right.
And it seems to be a social variable throughout the English-speaking world everywhere. That when you're being colloquial, you say in, and when you're being formal, you say ing. It's everywhere. Everybody does it, except some people are never formal. Okay, that's just the ing variable then. TH fronting is a lovely, and we talked about it a little bit when we listened to estuary English. Why fronting? What I'm talking about is that th changes to f and th changes to v. Why do we call it fronting?
Mouth.
Yeah, it goes forward in the mouth. Instead of being a dental sound, it becomes a labiodental sound, so it moves forward. That's why we call it fronting. It's not quite as simple as that, so you get words like mother, brother, and you get think instead of think. But this only happens when the occurs in the middle of a word. When it occurs at the front of a word, this, that, other things happen instead. We'll talk about that when we get to it. That's TH fronting. The bath trap split we've talked about, bath trap instead of bath trap. L vocalization is that the dark L turns into O. So that milk becomes milk, milk, okay. Very, very common in most British pronunciations. And you could listen to examples of hypercorrection. This is rather interesting. Okay, if you're pronouncing milk, and people are saying, you must pronounce your L's. Don't say milk, say milk. And if you're trying to put the L back in, you might, instead of using the dark L, which is used in RP in front of a consonant, or you might use a light L and say milk. And we can hear it in, say, milk. That would be hypercorrection. So somebody who says milk, normally they're trying to speak with an RP accent, or they've actually moved into some sort of RP accent, and you can show this hypercorrection by things like a light pronunciation of L where it shouldn't be, milk. There is an example of that on the tape. Diphthong shift, okay. Glottalization, briefly, that it's not quite like this, but we'll say that t changes to it's getting common in RP, very common in estuary English.
That changes to what?
This is a glottal stop. So that the word that is pronounced that. that. Okay. Sometimes in London it happens between vowels. My name Peter is pronounced Peter by my people who still know me in London.
Oh, you're talking about like bottle.
Bottle, that's right. But very common is glottalization when it occurs at the end of words. I use it in words like that. That's not true. T at the end of words is very often glottalized. Be careful, Icelanders, not to glottalize d. Icelanders often go to London and they come back saying wouldn't. I wouldn't do it. Although there are places where that does happen in England, it doesn't happen very much in London. You don't glottalize the leanest stops, you only glottalize the 40 stops. That's glottalization. WH glide reduction, that means that instead of saying wh, you say w, and that is WH glide reduction has really happened everywhere in the world. There are just some places where it doesn't happen. Some American accents don't have it. They say what and which. Some Scottish accents don't have it. They say what and which. And some people who are very, very formal and think a lot about their pronunciation don't have it. They say, what do you want? But then they make mistakes because they're not doing it naturally. So what I was taught to say what and not what in school. Sort of like some of the people of my age in Icelandic schools were taught to say where instead of or hvað instead of hvað. And nobody does it except people who are just trying to be sort of like that. So WH glide reduction, listen to that. H dropping. Remember that H dropping is dropping the H on stressed words, not dropping it on little words like him and his, which is normal. Dropping it on stressed words. And ask whether there is a foot strut split always.
What sort of stress words?
Okay. Now, okay. Examination question. Examination question last December. Underline the words which are dropped with the H's which are dropped out in RP. What was the sentence? What has happened, something like that, to his left hamstring? Okay, what has happened to his left hamstring? Underline the words which are dropped out in RP, and in RP the weak forms has dropped out. So this is dropped out and this is dropped out in normal RP and pretty well everywhere in the world.
So you're talking about when you say what has happened to this?
Yeah, what has happened to his left hamstring? I'm talking about dropping the H's in stressed words.
Oh,
Okay.
So the hamstring had happened.
So that would be dropped out in where you get H dropping. H dropping. H dropping is dropping it out everywhere. Okay? And H dropping is almost 100% everywhere in England. Get that into your minds. Except for the people who speak RP like I do, and one or two areas where it's not happened. In northeast Anglia, some parts of Wales it's not happened. But in the country, in the towns, everybody has H dropping. They took it from the French, because the French have H dropping everywhere as well. Yes, you do.
When they speak French, yeah, but when they transcribe English.
No, okay.
The opposite.
Yeah, that's right. But no, yeah, I mean when they speak French. And that is probably, remember we were talking about Sprachbund? It's probably a movement from France up into England. It goes over that area, dropping the H's everywhere.
French are cool. The French are cool.
The French are very cool, yes. Exactly. But I think actually it's not actually a Sprachbund. I don't think we're doing it because we're copying the French. I think it's something which is happening because it's much later than the contact between French and English. It doesn't happen until much later. When the French language comes into English, then H is still pronounced in French. And H dropping I don't think happens until about the 18th century. That'd be a late effect, yeah. Don't forget that France and England were at war for so many hundreds and hundreds of years, And the British population hated the French more than they later hated the Germans. It's quite amazing, yeah. I mean, we called you frogs for a long time, didn't we? That's amazing, isn't it? Amazing, this long drawn-out war between the English and the French. And throughout the war, throughout these 100, 200 years of the war, there was a tremendous amount of tourism going on at the same time. And the English nobility would tour through France, you know.
We hate you.
So would there be battles in some places? They would just go round the battles, you know. So amazing. And there was French tourism in England as well. Wars were very different in those days, obviously. So let's listen to Andover in Hampshire. And you've been doing that, haven't you? And here we go. Now, the reason this is in UGLA and not on the web is that I've stolen it from Wells. And I think what I should do, as I said, I can't, I don't want to put it open to everybody because it's copyright. But I'm wondering whether I shouldn't make a copy of it on CD for you. I've got that, and I can copy off CDs for you. Or put it somewhere on my net where nobody can find it, but I'll give you the secret URL so that you can download it. Because they're all here, and what is rather nice is not only that he talks about, there's Andover, but he also gives an introduction. And we could listen to that. Now I have to juggle this a bit to turn this off. I have to turn off my microphone so you won't be able to hear me anymore.
Well, now we turn to the south of England, number 4, and again we have several excerpts for you. First of all, from Andover in Hampshire. In the west of England, the rhotic west, historical R retained, for example, in the items words, water, important. H, again a bit variable. We have a hypercorrect H in the word ancient, pronounced as hancient. In words of the standard lexical set Bath, we have a long vowel but a front one, as in the item past. The diphthong in words like mouth has a very definitely front starting point of the O type. We have the items crown and township. The man here is talking about the name and history of Andover.
Oh, the name derived from the Saxon words Andover or Andefren, but it means spring and water. And it was such an important town that William the Conqueror didn't give away like he did all the other manors in the north of Hampshire. He retained Andover to himself. And to this day, we pay a rental, a very nominal sum of £10, to a nominee of the Crown. It is a link with this ancient custom and past history of this very, very old, was a borough worse luck, now it's only a township.
There you go now. I'm recording again. Oh, and it's not. Oh, perhaps I can have this going. Lovely. I noticed another hypercorrection here that he doesn't mention. He mentions the word hancient. He seems to say hancient, but if you noticed, he also says himself. And that really is hypercorrection, because normally he would, even if it was an RP speaker, he'd be saying himself. Kept it to himself. So he really is being a bit hypercorrective here.
I was just one question about this list. What sort of markings are you supposed to put on the lines? I'm not giving you a right or a wrong. I'm giving you this as a template for you to make your own comments. Yeah. I know that, but I don't quite understand what we're supposed to put in the lines there.
You're supposed to put something in the lines which reminds you about what's going on. That's all. If you're doing it absolutely as I sort of put it out there, then what you would simply do would, as the word word here first, words, you would simply give the RP, words, and then you give the accent, which is words. That's the difference. Yeah, I think it would be good for you. Okay, but you should also remember to mark then that this, the variable here is roticity. Okay, that's the roticity variable.
We can just comment whatever we want, right?
I want you just to get in your mind. Okay, when you do your final paper, I'll be giving you text you've not heard, and I should just be asking you to make as many comments as you can on this text. It'll be a short text, perhaps 2 sentences. As many comments as you can, and I'll just look at them and count up all the correct comments. That's all I'll do. So then you would say here, he's obviously pronouncing his R in words, so he hasn't got R dropping. That sort of thing.
We can find the phonetic alphabet on your page, right?
Go into the phonetics thing.
Right.
It's the same one that I used in phonetics. It doesnn't work on Vista apparently. It doesn't work on Mac, but you can also go into, if you go to my phonetics page, there's a link into the IPA phonetics page. You can also find lots of other fonts which might work instead.
I think it doesn't work with Vista.
It does work with Vista. Okay, somebody was telling me they couldn't make it work with Vista.
What, phonetic writing?
The P0
My P0 thing. Yeah. It didn't work with Vista. But other people have told me it does work with Vista. So it just depends. You've got to be nice to your computer. Stroke it gently, and then it might work.
You're talking about the PO font.
Yeah, I'm talking about my PO font, which is the one I use all the time. But you can always download lots of really good fonts. The only thing about the fonts that you download is that you have to work out some really strange keystrokes. And if you download and the thing is that you've got probably an Icelandic keyboard, and the keystrokes will be the keystrokes for an American keyboard that you're told to do. So you sometimes have to, maybe a lot of just opening up symbol and finding it in symbol and then pasting it all over. It's a bit annoying.
But do we need to do it on the computer?
No. Handwrite it. It's much nicer. I much prefer handwriting. Well, I won't. I'll ask the home assignments. I'll ask you to give them in, and people who are distance learners, I'll ask them to send them either scanned in or send them by the post. Did you hear? Oh, the name derived. It's a little bit of diphthong shift. Derived, not derived, but derived. In the first line here. In the first line, the name derived, it's a little bit of diphthong shift. You'll often hear very slight diphthong shift. So whenever you come here in the south of England or Australia and you get a price vowel, these vowels, these diphthongs, listen carefully to whether there's diphthong shift there. Words. Does he have fleece merger? Does he say mean, or has he got a diphthong shift on mean? Mean. I don't think he does here. I'll give you one beautiful diphthong shift from America a little bit later, where young kids are talking together and they say Marine, from a little island, from Tangier Island in the west. Well, they say is that, but there doesn't Marine it. It's fantastic pronunciation.
What word is that? I can't hear it.
Marine. Yeah, well, I've got it on tape and you listen to it. It's amazing. He doesn't mean it. Can you see that? Fantastic pronunciation. Water, important. Listen to his clear diphthong shift on town, something like that. And a slight diphthong shift on away, slight diphthong shift on like, Now, here is a bit strange. Listen to the way he says it, because American speakers, we're going over time, aren't we? Okay, I'll finish here. American speakers would expect this to be Hampshire or something like that, or Hampshire. But the normal pronunciation of the people who live there and of our good RP of the SHIR endings is sh. Hampshire. Okay, so
Why do you say good RP?
thank you. I stand corrected. Traditional RP. Hampshire. Hampshire. But he's got an R there. He's saying Hampshire. Or you could write it like this, because it's a schwa with a little r in it. Hampshire. Something like that. Okay. That's very American. That's the American. He doesn't have that. He has this one. Hampshire. Hampshire. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, listen always, whenever you've got an English text, listen, find the strut words. Very important. Find all the strut words and find all the Bath words. I should have written that in capital letters, because we usually write these lexical items in back. Listen to him. Is he saying bath or bath? Is he saying strut or strut? This is the two things you can always find to say whether it's south or north, south or Midland, whenever you get an English text. Look at a strut word, look at a bath word. I can't go on with that now. I would like you, perhaps, if you have problems with this text, if there's anything you want to ask, can you bring them along next week? Listen to the Oxford text, which it does entirely different things, and I shall be pointing some of that out to you. The Norfolk text is amazing. Yeah, it's a really old-fashioned pronunciation, and this horrible pronunciation of the teacher who has an RP accent, who says, "We Norfolk lads." Incredible. And I won't take a lot of time. Cockney is nice, but I won't take a long time over the adoptive RP. I'll just explain what's going on there.